Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Ann was otherwise occupied, so producer Nick stepped in to join Louis in speaking with Deb Borchardt, co-founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Green Market Report, a financial news site for the cannabis industry, back for her second visit to the Green Rush podcast. In addition to her publishing duties, Deb is also the founder of the Green Market Summit, a new conference series meant to bring together the industry's top respected companies, brands, and executives. In partnership with TheStreet.com, the inaugural Green Market Summit will take place on September 14th in New York City at the One World Trade Center and will cover the advanced economic state of cannabis. Don't sit back, lean forward. And now on to our interview with Deb Borchardt.
Fabulous. All right. So, hey, Deborah, thanks for joining us again. It's nice to have repeat well, you're not a customer, you're a guest, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Thank you for having me again.
Well, you know, you are one of the most important voices in cannabis when it comes to financial reporting. And while we'll get into what happened today, and we're recording this on August 15th, I really want to talk about the Green Market Summit. It seems like every day there's a new cannabis conference. I'm heading up to Toronto tomorrow for the end of the MJ Biz conference and the Benzinga conference. And you're going to be launching your inaugural Green Market Summit in September. Can you tell us what people who are going to come to this can expect and what makes this different than other investor conferences that people might be attending?
Well, Louis, you're absolutely right. The conference calendar has gotten quite crowded, and I would agree with you. They were all starting to feel the same to me, and I've attended many, as you have attended many, and it was getting to the point where, you know, I wasn't really even engaging that much in the conference because I felt like it was just the same old. And I can imagine for people that are attending them, they're feeling that as well. And so with Green Market Summit, what we wanted to do was accomplish a couple of things. One, my background is the Wall Street world. And I felt like Wall Street conferences were a little different than what I was seeing at the cannabis conference. And I wanted to emulate that style. So the idea is we have 5 different panels. Our keynote address is Jim Cramer, who co-founded co-founded TheStreet.com, is a star at CNBC, has done over 1,000 shows of Mad Money. Jim and I worked together for years, and we always got along famously. So Jim is doing my keynote. He's going to be interviewing the CEO of the Green Organic Dutchman, which had a very successful IPO this year. So right off the bat, we're already kind of setting the stage that this is a conference that is really diving deep on the financial side of the business. So we're not going to be going into a lot of stuff about advocacy or legislation. All that stuff is fine. You know, medical, of course, important. But what we're doing is we're going into a very targeted area. And so the idea here is that people from the New York investment community can come to this conference and really learn about certain sectors within the industry, but looking at it from a financial point of view. So, for example, if we're going to have Hyper Inc., which is a company known for transaction processing, we're going to get into the wonky nature of banking and transaction processing for cannabis companies. So this is a whole lot deeper of a dive than most people.
Well, and full disclosure, I'm actually going to be on one of the panels and talking to Danny Moses, who, to all you millions of our listeners, just heard on a recent episode. So we're going to get into the real nuts and bolts of how to analyze whether an investment is a good investment, whether from a public company or a private company perspective as well. So I'm excited. Like I'm this is a truly differentiated conference, and I'm, you know, this is as much of a softball for you as we can make it, because we love you. But I truly am excited about this. I mean, I am not as excited about going up to Canada for what we're doing, or going out to Vegas again for the MJ Biz show, because it's a lot of people hawking shit, right? You have all these different things And what your conference is about, and what this podcast is about, is really that intersection of cannabis and the capital markets. And I think hopefully this is really going to encapsulate that.
Right. So one of the things too that we're offering out of this conference is, and in this again, this is similar to the Wall Street world. When you would have like J.P. Morgan do a healthcare conference, all the J.P. Morgan analysts would go nuts for 2 weeks before or whatever, writing reports, and then that day of the conference they would issue a new report. So each one of our panels is going to have a new report issued that day with new information that hasn't been out before. And each one of these panels is, again, it's kind of a deep dive into their area. So we're going to have 5 new reports released on that day. So that audience is really going to get a great amount of information by attending.
That is incredible. Like it's great to hear everything that's happening with Green Market Summit. One thing I also want to touch on though is when we first had you on, you had just launched the Green Market Report, and we're kind of getting close to that 1-year anniversary of that. And so I was hoping that you would be able to talk about this last year and what's it like been to grow your media property while also trying to cover this crazy industry with everything surrounding cannabis.
I mean, the growing pains. We want to know about what
Yeah.
I mean, you're an entrepreneur, and the entrepreneurial experience is really unique, and you're in the cannabis industry, but adjacent to it, but you still have those growing pains. So what's this been like?
So it's been very rewarding and very challenging all at the same time. I've had some wonderful highs, and I've had some terrible lows. I think most entrepreneurs will tell you that. You have that moment where you think, why did I do this? This is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is insane. I think that, the rewarding part, of course, is covering the industry in the way that I've been wanting to cover it, which was a smart approach and an approach, again, from the financial wherewithals. And that I feel that we've been successful at. The couple of things that I get a little frustrated with is we haven't really been able to do some of the expansion strategies that we've been wanting to push forward. And I'm hoping that once we get this event behind us, we'll be able to start to do some of those things. So we're really looking forward to an exciting back half of the year. But the past year has been all about building a product and giving it a strong foundation, giving it consistency, and trying to build page views and build exposure and visibility. And that's been tough. I have to say that's been tough.
Most people learn from mistakes, right? Like you look at a baseball player, and when he's up to bat and he then looks at video, he's not looking at what he did when he hit a home run. He's really looking at like when he popped out or struck out, so that he can fix that. Has there been a mistake that you now you look back on, you went, shit, that was such an easy thing to avoid? How did I step in that dog shit right there? Is there one that you think about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I came from a digital journalism background, so I knew that advertising was not going to be the end-all, be-all for our website. I knew it was going to be a portion of our revenue, but not a big portion, but still a portion of our revenue. That I miscalculated tremendously. I really thought that with marijuana companies being unable to advertise elsewhere, that they would really jump to having a chance to advertise in front of a really strong group of eyeballs, if you will. That hasn't really happened. And I think that the marijuana companies have less money to spend on this type of thing than I realized. I thought going into it, they would have great budgets for this and would be actively happy to have a place to advertise, and that did not work out the way I thought. So we've really had to reassess that issue and kind of pivot. So while we were only planning on doing 2 events a year, back to our first point that the event calendar is crowded, we're going to have to do more events in order to be able to continue to support the news. I think that's something that you see with every media company, whether it's Bloomberg or, even like a Women's Wear Daily. which does like 10 events a year now. Most media companies are having to do other things to bring in money because advertising is just not going to keep the lights on.
So that's one thing that you were able to learn and grow from. What's something in the last year that you can point to as like a really big success for Green Market Report?
So I think that we've gotten a whole lot of visibility and attention from other media outlets, which is pretty unusual because that's kind of an unwritten rule in journalism is you don't cover other media. I mean, I'm that way. And I've been really pleasantly surprised at how many other outlets have chosen to want to cover us and some of our successes with our reports that we've written or some of the data we've pulled together. And that's been pleasantly surprising. I've really enjoyed that. One of the things that we do at Green Market Report is a lot of original content. There's a lot of financial websites out there in cannabis that are not doing original content. They're just republishing press releases and making it look like they're doing original content. And we really do put out original content, and that takes time. And I'm real proud that we're doing that.
So, there have been a couple like moments this year that have made the world, at least the United States, pause when it comes to cannabis. And I think one of them was the John Boehner joining the board of Acreage, and I think another one was the Farm Act, McConnell's Hemp Farming Act, which has gotten a lot of bipartisan support. It really seems like the politics of cannabis are shifting. If this bill passes, right? If the Hemp Act passes, what do you think that means more broadly? Is this a wedge to getting the Congress to try and pass legalization, or is this just really going to make waves for CBD?
I think it's really just going to make waves for CBD. I honestly think that the FDA's approval of GW Pharmaceuticals drug is really going to do more for the legalization effort than the hemp bill. Because I think the problem with the hemp bill is while it's being supported by McConnell, and McConnell really he's got holding the purse strings for anything that's getting voted on. So he, as you know, is the guy that's choosing what gets voted on.
Yeah, he's the Sessions of the Senate.
Right. So that's going to be the issue.
And that's Pete Sessions, not Jeff Sessions.
Yeah. Will the House, fall in line? That's I don't know. That's a big question mark. So to me, I think there's going to be more traction out of the FDA and GW Pharmaceuticals, and only because GW Pharmaceuticals keeps insisting in every public statement they say is that it's going to be rescheduled within 90 days of their FDA approval. They've said that more than once. Now, the FDA is, as we know, has been very coy about it, and so has the DOJ. They've not said a word. But I can't imagine that Justin Glover over at GW Pharmaceuticals would say that multiple times without knowing that that's going to happen.
I mean, makes sense. So I want to stay on politics for a second. We're coming up on the midterms, and I know you're not a political reporter or prognosticator, but just take a minute and do a little thought experiment here. So regardless of whether the Democrats take the House or the Republicans hold it, Paul Ryan is a lame duck, right? And he will have from November through January of next year to pretty much do whatever the fuck he wants. Do you think he will force a vote on whether it be Rohrabacher or Blumenauer and making it not just part of a continuing amendment, but like formalizing it or literally moving to deschedule? Because given the polling on medical cannabis and adult use, it's like the most popular thing in the country. He'll have the same cover that John Boehner had. Do you think he's going to man up and actually push something like this through?
No, I really don't. And I think just because there's still a lot of stigma around the legislation, and I think that, if poll numbers determined what we had with legislation, we would have had gun control. We wouldn't be talking about women's health, reproductive rights. those things, those two items, whether right or wrong, the polls show overwhelmingly that Americans want things to be decided a certain way in those areas, but the legislation has not followed that. So I agree with you. It is definitely a bipartisan issue. We're certainly seeing many, many more Republicans crossing the aisle and feeling more comfortable with it. But I feel like these guys just don't want to be that guy. None of them want to be that guy.
Other than Dana Rohrabacher, who's that guy for Putin as well.
Yeah, I think that's starting to make people a little queasy. But he seems to be in a good position in his state, so that may not be an issue. What I think is a little more interesting is in Texas, where you've got Beto O'Rourke going up against Ted Cruz, and they're neck and neck now. And O'Rourke is definitely a pro-cannabis guy.
The Democrats should embrace this. It is patently absurd, and it's almost like political malpractice for them not to take both arms, grab a cannabis plant, and make every picture that they have in every political ad about legalization. It just, it doesn't make sense. It speaks to proper economics, criminal justice reform, good medicine. I mean, there's nothing about this that they shouldn't be embracing, and it just blows my mind.
Totally agree. And I think that as we get more into, looking at cannabis as a treatment for opioid addiction, and that's been, the scourge of our country this, past few years, I think you're right. I think if you had a politician that said, hey, I think I have an idea on fixing this, and here it is, I'm like you. I can't imagine why people wouldn't say, well, maybe I don't like some of your other politics, but that really speaks to me. And I thought it was even more interesting. I don't know if you saw the news about fentanyl being used to as a drug for a prisoner execution.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, fentanyl? I knew that stuff was bad, but wow, that's really bad.
But do you think, is it possible, like Chris Crane put out a Forbes column on this a couple weeks ago about how Trump could essentially steal the cannabis, he could become the cannabis commander in chief. Do you think he would tell Jeff Sessions in some tweet that let's get this taken care of, let's show that we're the real progressives here, that we see cannabis as a positive issue for the country? Or
he wouldn't use the word progressive, but he would say we're supporting states' rights.
Yeah, supporting states' rights, take the win away from Chuck Schumer.
I just don't see that. I think that the only scenario I could possibly see would be just to get under his skin, because he, as we know, he clearly does not like Jeff Sessions at this point. And that would be clearly something that would get under his skin.
Oh my God, that would be so funny. If Volder Drumpf actually did that to fuck with Sessions, I would crap. I mean, look, I both do want him to do this and don't want him to do this. I want him to do it because, then we're going to stop seeing people get arrested. But if they deschedule right away, and we're going to ask this question later, it's gonna screw up a lot of these companies that have been working really hard.
Right.
So
right.
But these companies got to have go plans, right?
Yeah, but I think that they're planning on having a little bit more runway than if we saw something dramatic happen. And I just feel like right now, as you can tell with this administration, they just can't seem to be focused on like infrastructure, things of that nature. They're just constantly having to put out, fires of a, Russian nature. And it just doesn't seem like they can focus on getting any legislation passed. So I just don't see that Trump can focus on something like this. It just doesn't strike me as an important enough issue for him.
So banking is when the Cole memo was repealed, it fucked up any forward momentum in the banking side of the industry. Do you think that we're going to see either this year or next year something that takes place to help fix banking, or we're going to have to wait for a whole new administration?
Well, again, it kind of goes back to that whole federal illegal question. They can write all the memos that they want from here to Kingdom Come, and it's not going to make a difference for Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan, until it changes on that federal level. So until that changes, the banks are just not going to step in. There's just no level of comfort there. And I don't blame them. If I were at Wells Fargo, I'd be like, shh, no way. I am not stepping into this. The good part about that, though, is because they're not stepping in, is you've got companies like Hyper Inc. or, any of these other transaction companies that have an opportunity.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to jump to another question that we've been asking kind of more recently on the podcast with companies like Acreage announcing like they're going public and stuff. I would love to get your thoughts on like which IPOs, RTOs are you most looking forward to in 2018?
I really like Acreage, and I've kind of worked with them a bit, and I feel like I know them fairly well. I've been on panels with them. I also like Paleotech. I think that both of these firms are very similar in the sense that they're multi-state operators. I feel like both of these companies are trying to do things the right way, that they're trying to really keep their nose clean, that they're really trying to follow the rules, that they're just trying to deliver a good product. And because of that, I like both of those companies quite well. I think that there's several other smaller companies that are also looking to move forward. Not as wild about them.
Why?
I feel like, I like High Times, and I'm certainly not going to count them out because I think that they keep, impressing me with their ability to just keep pushing ahead. And they've got a great legacy. But I'm a little confused with the crowdfunding thing that they did right before going
you're
public.
not. They did that because they couldn't do it the normal way. I mean, most times when somebody goes through crowdfunding, it's because they couldn't get a legitimate S1 through, or they couldn't even back into a shell. You know this.
I know, but I'm not counting. I feel like they're going to be the underdog surprise. MJIC is out there. I'm not wild about that one either. I feel like they're just trying to jump in on the bandwagon of companies going public. That one's, I think
I don't know
Flower,
I don't know those guys.
Flower is going to be going public too this fall, and that's from that company's made up with Tom Flo who was original co-founder of MedRelief, and that one's got me kind of interested too. I kind of like that one too. They kind of remind me a little bit of Green Organic Dutchman, in that sense.
Which has the greatest ticker symbol ever.
God.
Yeah, it's really funny. So all of these companies are listing up in Canada, right? I mean, we still can't, if you were a U.S. company that touches the plan, or just if you're a U.S. company, you can't list on the NASDAQ, you can't list on the New York Stock Exchange, and you don't normally do an IPO on the OTC. So they've all been going up to the Canadian Securities Exchange or the CSE, which until the last couple of years was like the ultimate backwater for stock exchanges. But now they have hundreds of these cannabis companies listed up there. Do you think that like the head of the NASDAQ or the head of the New York Stock Exchange is looking at the CSE with envy or with lust? And by lust, I mean, do you think that they could be looking to buy?
No, not looking to buy. I don't see that. Well, ICE maybe. But I don't really see them looking to buy them. I do feel that it's upsetting them that they can't take advantage of this, that it's like watching money walk down the street past them. I think that certainly frustrates them to no end, but they clearly have drawn a line in the sand. Having said that, there are a couple of companies listed over at the NYSE that like India globalization, that I just don't understand how some of those companies are trading there and others have been turned down. So it's that I find a little odd.
Do you think they're loosen the either the uplisting requirements, or for the companies that don't touch the plant, say, all right, you know what, you're on. Like, I look at a company like Kush, which is a KCSA client. There is no reason that they shouldn't be listed on the NASDAQ. They are a perfect NASDAQ company. Actually, they're as good a New York Stock Exchange company because they're an industrial play. I know you talk to these guys. Are they trying to figure out a workaround, or are they just saying, until it's descheduled, we're fucked?
That's how I take it, is that they feel they do not want to go as very far into this. They're happy with Canadian companies because to them the Canadian companies have not broken any laws. They're happy with the biotech because GW Pharmaceuticals, Insys Therapeutics, Zenerba, they've got lots of biotech companies listed. They never look at their base compounds of their drugs, so they feel comfort there. But yeah, I find that odd that somebody like the NASDAQ can push back on a Kush, but then I know they're having conversations with High Times about listing. So, and they've turned me down and won't let me report from these locations. And I know these people. I have worked with them for years.
Wait, they won't let you stand in front of the exchange and say,
they won't let me tape inside.
That's crazy. I
stand outside like good old Roger Moore, like the film he did, Roger and Me, where he tried to get the interview with the Ford CEO.
Yeah.
I stand outside in front of the NASDAQ and tape my marijuana money video every week.
Take a box of chocolates that are infused, pass them around.
They won't let me come in and either.
Yeah, don't get her in trouble, Lewis.
They don't mind, like at the NICE, to have a Cheddar TV because they do all kinds of news, and then they just have their cannabis show. But because I'm cannabis only, they just say no. But I think that there's just going to end up being a tipping point where they will have to make some kind of movement somewhere. But I do feel that it's very I don't know if it's hypocritical or hard to gauge.
I think it's hypocritical because they will just try. You know what? There's so much hypocrisy still in the industry. It really gets me going.
I mean, how do you list innovative industrial properties, which clearly is a REIT, but clearly houses marijuana plants? How is that okay? But it's not okay for me to come and talk about the stock that they list and get money from. It's just, they wouldn't even let, I think it was Canopy Growth when they listed at the New York Stock Exchange, they wouldn't let them ring the bell.
Huh.
Like, how do you take $100,000 from someone to list them and then say, you know what, we're not really comfortable with you ringing the bell?
As somebody that's been at a bell ringing, I got to say that's my favorite part.
Bell ringings are fun. I think the NASDAQ does a great job with it too.
Yeah. Deb, let's stay on the M&A bent real quick for just a little bit more. Already this year, we've seen the biggest deal ever in the cannabis industry with Aurora buying MedReleaf. Acreage recently announced the $119 million raise. I'd love to get your thoughts on these major deals and just what impact on smaller players do these deals have.
Well, I think as we all can expect, it's going to be harder and harder for the small companies to compete with these bigger companies. And that's just going to be the nature of the beast. Whether they start to come in and acquire smaller companies or just muscle them out, it's definitely, it's just capitalism. It's what's going to happen. It's going to be tough. And
do you think it's too late for the small entrepreneur to get in? I mean,
no, I really don't, because what we're hoping is that there is going to be a place within these markets for the smaller player. The good part about all the restrictions with the marijuana regs is that a lot of these states, because you're not letting companies necessarily cross state lines, is that there does still exist an opportunity for local players or for smaller businesses. whether it's just at the dispensary level or whether it's at, maybe an edible company level. I think that there is still going to be an opportunity, but I don't think we're going to have kind of the Wild West that we saw of Colorado's early days, where you had multiple opportunities to start a brownie company or to start a dispensary. Though I think that opportunity has disappeared.
It is amazing, and all this money sloshing around means that there's just going to be an acceleration on the purchase of the big guys buying the little guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at Aurora. Aurora spends premium bucks every time they make an acquisition. I think we all look at it and go, "Wow, you paid that for that? Wow, that's a lot of money."
But they can, right? I mean, that's the value of being public, is that they have both the cash and now the equity to give. So these aren't all cash deals; they're a mix between the stock in the company that they're giving the company that they're buying, and cash. And that's why all of these companies are running to the markets, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, and then you thought it was big money until Constellation stepped in today, and they raised the bar a little higher.
Again, so as I said, we're recording on August 15th, and today it was announced that Constellation put $5 billion Canadian into Canopy Growth, taking basically a total 38% ownership stake in the company. Canopy is not making a lot of money right now.
No.
What are their total sales? Like, they're less than $100 million a year total, right?
Yeah.
So what is Constellation thinking? Why would they do this?
I've thought about that, and I was talking to someone earlier today, and the one thing that kind of struck us was that they paid a premium. And usually when you do a deal this big and it's a follow-on from a previous investment, you usually get a discount. You usually get to pick up the shares at a bargain rate. It's like, okay, I'm giving you this big chunk of change. I want a deal. And they paid a premium, which kind of struck me as unusual and a little odd. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, what did they pay for the first round? My gut feeling was that this was maybe $2 cost average their investment, that it was
a multi-billion-dollar cost average.
I know that sounds a little nutty, and maybe it is, but that's kind of how I was. It's doesn't it strike you as odd to pay that much of a premium?
Yes.
It wasn't a little.
I think that
big premium.
They must be looking at the data coming out of the states where cannabis is legal and the impact it's had on alcohol sales, right? I mean, you're seeing anywhere
for sure.
For sure, they're 10+% drops, right? So it's a long play.
It's a long play.
But
absolutely. They're thinking, if I'm a Vice stock already, or I'm a Sin stock, if I'm doing alcohol, why not have both ends of the recreational picture? I'm going to have alcohol and cannabis. We'll probably stay out of porn, but I'll do these other two things. And
they kind of all three go together.
Well, when you're looking at Sin stuff, that's what it is. But I do think that that's also part of it, is seeing alcohol sales drop in these markets certainly makes them want to get in early. So maybe they're thinking, well, I'm paying a premium for Canopy Growth shares right now, but in the long run, I'm really not. I think we all feel, though, that as the Canadian market matures and gets past this original push with the recreational sales beginning, we're going to see the price of the product go down. We're going to see too much expansion. We're going to see too many facilities, too much overproduction, and that market is going to have, a reset.
Well, the thesis for companies like Canopy and Aurora is not for domestic consumption. They are looking at export, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because the plant itself, while it costs anywhere, if you're a really good grower, it costs you like $200 to $300 a pound. And if you're a shitty grower, it's costing you $600 a pound. But if you're making it for CBD or mass consumption, you can get it down to like the $80 a pound range. And then they're only going to do it. They're all going to grow it outdoors, and they're going to grow it in Southern Europe, or they'll grow it in Latin America. And then what happens to the Canadian market?
Right. And there's a lot, when you really start to break down the international markets, most of the international markets are medical only, which are not big profiting, areas within the cannabis industry. Most international countries don't want recreational or not into recreational at all. It's really just the US and Canada. Look at Jamaica. Jamaica's had cannabis for decades. They're only legalizing medical. So when these are very unproven, these are very unproven markets, very unproven. To me, I thought that Scythian Biosciences ditching their Caribbean and Latin American assets to go into Florida, I thought that said everything. I could see Florida being a much better use of my money than going and wondering whether sales were going to take off in Colombia. I think that international assumption is a crapshoot.
It's a much longer play, right? I mean, how long did it take for the U.S. to go from medical to first adult use? 20 years. So about 20 years, right?
Canopy did make it clear that they were not, while this money was going to help them strategically expand into other countries and that the U.S. was a priority, they made it clear they would not go into the U.S. unless it were legal on the federal level. So that, they're not jumping into the U.S. anytime soon until that changes.
So I want to quickly shift us back to politics because I'm a poli-sci junkie, and Deb, I would love your thoughts on this. We got the November election coming up. It seems like this year is just flying by, and this year I know we're going to have voters in Michigan and North Dakota are going to decide on adult access for their state. Utah, of all states, is set to vote on legalizing medical marijuana. I wanted to just get your thoughts on, what are you expecting to see from voters this fall? Do you think that these pro-cannabis referendums can actually pass in these states?
I do, and I think that you got to be an awfully cold-hearted person to turn down a mother whose child has epileptic seizures. That's a tough one. I mean, what politician wants to be that guy?
Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think that becomes really hard at the local level to not go with that. And I think that they know the polls are in favor of it. And so if they say, yes, I'm for medical, but only medical, it's a little more palatable. And then they show that they've got a warm heart. And then, listen, if
I'm sorry. They don't have a warm heart.
I know it's optics.
It's a lump of coal. Let's be clear.
It's optics, but they, as we've seen in other states where if the voters vote for it and the politicians don't want it, they can do all kinds of things to slow it down. But I think that you're definitely going to continue to see more progress on that front.
So we're coming towards the end, and we got a couple more questions for you. But one of them that we've been running by for the last couple of months is, I personally believe that Donald Trump is going to deschedule in October. It's going to be the October surprise. It's going to be his effort to stem off a blue wave. I'm probably wrong, but I really think that this is going to happen because it doesn't cost him anything. It will be unbelievably popular, and the Democrats are going to go fucking nuts. So, even though he's not a smart man when it comes to policy, he has a real nose for politics, and it looks like a political thing to me. So let's go under the assumption that sometime in the next year or two, we see a descheduling. What does day one look like? And then what does 4 years after that look like?
Good question. I think day one, you will see the banks jump into play. I think that they'll immediately start to flip the switch. MasterCard and Visa will be knocking on the doors of all those dispensaries and saying, hey, you want our little machines? I think that you'll also start to see the acquisitions start to play out. You'll have the big tobacco, the big pharma, all those will just...
Constellation finishes eating Canopy, right?
Yeah. I mean, you'll just start to see a lot of acquisitions happen from companies that have been reluctant to jump in. maybe even some of the private equities. And I think once you have that banking issue done, then you'll start to see a lot of financial instruments show up. Maybe that's when we start to see more financial products. And then 4 years out, I think it ends up becoming treated just like a product, like an alcohol product. We have liquor stores where alcohol is sold, and that, now we'll have dispensaries where those products are sold, and it will be just much more acceptable. And I do think that we'll see less alcohol consumption as more cannabis consumption happens. And maybe that'll make our country just a happier and nicer place if people are self-medicating with cannabis versus alcohol.
They're already doing it. I mean, it's
a lot less angry.
Yeah. Deb, we're at that section of the show where we do Puff Puff Pass, where we ask our guests to say the two things that they really like about the industry and the one thing that's driving them fucking nuts. So your turn. Go ahead. Puff, puff, and then pass.
All right. Two things I like. I like the fact that there are so many female-led companies and so many female executives. I think that that's just so wonderful to go into a conference or go into a panel and see so many women. It just warms my heart. I think the next thing that I like a lot is just the excitement of all the entrepreneurs in the small business. I feel like it's just brought so much back to the idea of you can start a company, you can start a business, maybe without a whole lot of capital, but there's just a ton of opportunity. And I just feel like this industry has so much opportunity that we haven't seen in some of the other mature industries. And on the past, the thing that I'm just so frustrated with is how there's sometimes not a lot of support within the cannabis industry for each other. And I think I'd like to see, that would be great to see more of that. And maybe I'm just saying that from a media standpoint. I get asked so many times to do things for free. And I just kind of have gotten to the point where I'm a little tired of being asked to do things for free. And I think that this industry needs to kind of start to move past that. And that's the thing I don't like is, always being asked to do stuff for free.
Yeah, there's an assumption. There's always an assumption that if you've done something as a good person once, that it's assumed that you're going to continue to do that. And that's, we all ultimately sell one thing, which is our time. And when somebody takes it from you and you get no value for it, you can do that once or twice. But after that, it's not right. I understand.
Yep, I'm sure you do from your end, especially on the public relations. I'm sure you face that quite a bit. That I'm sure a lot of people go, "Hey, well, I know you've been working for me for 60 hours this week, but can I get a break on that bill?" It's like, what? Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure you face that too.
It is what it is. So. Actually, can we add something positive, please? That was like such a downer.
Yeah, it's a little bit too sad.
Who's the person that you would want to grill, like a cannabis person that you'd want to get, like you want to go full on Mike Wallace on? You're like, why did you stop beating your wife last week? It's like there's no good answer to that question. So,
that's a hard one because there are some shady characters in our industry. I don't know if I would grill him, but I still find that Steve D'Angelo is just a fascinating person. Just from his background, from being with the Yippies back in the day.
I know who he is, but can you, for people who don't know who he is?
He's with Harborside.
He's like the father of the medical cannabis movement.
Yeah, he's been in the forefront of wanting marijuana legalization since the 70s, and I just find him. I've met with him before and I've talked to him, and I always find him really just a fascinating person to talk to because he's been at it for so long, and that the company, his company Harborside, is actually doing a reverse takeover, and they're going to be going public too in a deal valued at $200 million. So here's this guy that used to be this like hippie dude from the 70s.
He's still a hippie dude from the 70s.
Still a hippie dude from the 70s. So I think that, to me at this point, I'd be curious to talk to Steve and just find out, does it blow your mind that you're now selling your company is going to be worth $200 million? Did you ever in a million years imagine that? I think that would be someone I wouldn't be grilling him in a bad way. I would really more be grilling him in kind of a good way. I guess in a bad way, I'd probably grill like somebody like a Jeff Sessions.
Oh boy,
oh, that would be fun.
That would be fun. Or Pete Sessions, either one of them, like the Sessions twins. It's yeah. So all right, we've taken up enough of your time. Thank you so much, Deb. I'm really looking forward to the Green Market Summit. The date is September 14th. And where is it again?
It's at the One World Trade Center in the Condé Nast location on the 34th floor. It overlooks the 9/11 Memorial and the New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty. So it's an exquisite event space.
And that was us speaking with Deb Borchardt, the co-founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Green Market Report. You can check out all of Deb's latest work by checking out her site, greenmarketreport.com, and you can learn about the inaugural Green Market Summit that Deb was talking about at the website greenmarketsummit.com. We'll include all these links in the show notes as well. And then remember, if you want to chat with us, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle at KCSA_cannabis, as well as at www.kcsa-cannabis.com. And then shoot us an email at greenrush@kcsa.com. Let us know what you think of the show and who we should have on next. And don't forget to subscribe to The Green Rush in your favorite podcatcher. And as Lewis and Ann always say, that's one take, Shay, one take.